Informa is a UK-listed holding company, and we describe ourselves as a business that operates in the knowledge and information economy. We're listed here in the United Kingdom, but only about 15% of our revenue is out of the United Kingdom. So we are, by size, actually largely an American company. About 45–50% of our business is in the States. And essentially, we run three businesses. We operate in three markets. And by size, our first market is an academic publishing business, upper-level academic publishing for teachers and postgraduate students and academics, not textbooks or for kids or undergraduates. Our second largest business is a business data business where we package and provide businesses with data products, normally on a subscription basis in key markets. And our third business is an exhibition and festivals business. We own essentially business-to-business trade shows and conferences targeted at connecting buyers and sellers in key business-to-business markets. We're a B2B business, 100%. We have a tiny consumer business, but we're a business-to-business business. Well, we put a big store behind internal communications. We have a very open internal communications environment. There's maybe particular reasons for that for us. I succeeded a chief executive who'd been here for many years and was in many ways the founder of the company. And we've gone through quite a big cultural change, commercial change, and set of operational changes over the last 3 years. And when you're going through quite big change programs, particularly in people businesses, communication becomes key. So we do a lot of internal communications. We have our own messaging board, we have our own video set, we have our own calling network, we have our own IM, we have our own video network, we do town halls. We're quite a discursive company, and we put a lot of store behind that. So internally, we would self-describe ourselves as quite a chatty company, and if you were to step inside the business, people would say they engage with the chief executive a lot, I would say. I had a session yesterday with our digital leadership group, our technology leadership group, so about 50 of them around the world, using a variety of different communication mechanisms. We're having this debate about should we prescribe messaging platforms, because we've now got about 15 in the company. And we came to the conclusion, actually through the lens of the millennials, that why bother? People ultimately will use whichever platform or system is right for them. The company can say, well, we prefer to use, whatever. But actually, if people want to set up a group on WhatsApp or Chatter, then that's fine. And let have it. And that's really, so we've taken a very light touch approach to controlling the growth of how people want to connect and communicate. I think in the first instance, I think it's a personal thing. And then I think it depends on your job. I mean, I've held positions before which are clearly public roles. And if you hold a public role, particularly a public position in a public body, then you can't really do that and not accept some degree of visibility goes with the job. My own view of my job as today, and I would say that's probably my preference as well, which may be why I'm doing the job, is that actually public profile is rarely value adding to my shareholders or my customers. Inside the business, I would say I have actually a very high profile, and that's quite purposeful. Partly, as I said at the beginning, because we're doing a lot of change and we're trying to move things around a lot. Externally, I mean, I've been in this job now for nearly 3 years. I've never done an interview, ever. And, I take the view that no one's really that interested in what time I get up in the morning and how many times I go to the gym, and who my mentors have been. I'm just not sure that moves the dial for the business. Inside the business, if people want to engage in a personal conversation, that's a very different matter, because I have a very different relationship with them. It's particular maybe for Informa because we don't really trade Informa as a brand. We trade through the product brands and our service brands. So our customers might buy Lloyd's List, or they might buy a Routledge journal, or they might attend the Monaco Yacht Show. They don't really know that any of those are owned by Informa, and it doesn't matter that they do. And so creating a profile of the Informa CEO isn't necessarily additive, and I slightly take the view might get in the way. So I don't pursue it. My board doesn't feel I'm required to, and I've never been asked by one shareholder why I don't have more profile. I think leadership has become more of a premium requirement. I think that's definitely true. And if you're running a company of a reasonable size, and particularly if you're running an international business, and therefore, if I take our business, 20 or 30% of our business trades at what we call the weekend. So you are, for all intents and purposes, therefore, pretty much always on. The premium on leadership and the personality of the leader, I think, is very relevant to the decision a board may make about who to appoint and when to change. But I think that's different from profile. And I'm always slightly skeptical when profile and leadership become the same thing. It doesn't mean that it's not required in some instances. So if a company finds itself in a demanding situation, or has an external event, or finds itself under attack in some way, shape or form, whether it be a cyber attack or a corporate attack, then clearly in that situation it is the role of the leader to take a public position on the matter in question. But whether or not that needs to be surrounded by the profile of that person's hinterland and background, I'm slightly skeptical about that. It's a difficult one to answer, because clearly there are some businesses where that would be valuable. Fashion businesses, and fashion now extends into technology and travel, and so fashion isn't just a clothing or accessories category. My own personal view is our business is very flat. We're not a very pyramidal business. We're a corporate, but we operate much more like a professional services business. So I slightly take the view that whilst I have the job of the leader, that's partly because there are things that I'm required to do that other people aren't. But I don't view it as a hierarchical role. And if you push yourself out in front too often, it can, I think, in a perverse way, limit the number of talents you can attract to the company. Because if there's one role for the big leader, then, well, how much light gets under the shadow for other people? And I have a management team here of a dozen. At least 3 of them have been chief executives of public companies themselves. We have 30 or 40 entrepreneurs in the business who've built really substantial businesses. So we want to be a place where big players are keen to come and operate, because that's the nature of our business. And I think that changes the profile and leadership dynamic quite a bit. I think in other businesses, perhaps it's different, but that would be the way I would think about it. Somebody once said, I can't remember who it was, that the freedom of the press is generally only afforded to those who own them. And the danger with living out there is that if you live by the sword, you can die by that sword as well. It's not a reason not to do it, but profile is a very ephemeral thing, and it's a fashion thing too. Whereas actually, what are you trying to do with the business? Ultimately, you're trying to build long-term sustainable value and differentiation. You're trying to build capability. You might need at times bursts of profile, and even I would recognize that. If you want to go and raise money, sometimes the markets will demand a greater degree of visibility as to why they should back you or the management team. If you're trying to recruit talent, particularly millennial talent, the company certainly needs to have some profile. And if you're the leader of the company, you have to be the carrier of that. So I'm not saying it has no value, but I would tread with caution. That would be my general advice. You have to accept there's a leadership responsibility, and you have to welcome that, or else you're in the wrong job. But I wouldn't regard leadership and profile as siblings, or maybe certainly not as twins, maybe not as siblings, certainly cousins. But you have to be slightly cautious. You always have to be a leader, but you don't always have to have profile. Well, the first thing I would say to any chief executive is communications is a part of your job. And most people become a chief executive having done a divisional role or a specialist role, where the communications might have been there, but when you become the chief executive, the leader of the company, communications, a bit like people, becomes a big part of your responsibility. And you have to embrace that. So if it's not your natural skill, like anything, take advice, take training, develop it. Second thing I'd say is I would always encourage people to focus more on internal communications than external communications, because external communications requires you to have something of substance to say, whereas internal communications, if you're the new leader of the company, everybody wants to hear from you as soon as, and generally repetitiously, in order that they can connect with you or not. And to have something of substance to say, you normally have to have run the business for a period of time. So I wouldn't rush to external profile unless you're taking over a business that's in a crisis and that's needed as part of the brief. That's a different question. The third thing I'd say is, if at the point where you're ready to be more visible externally because you think it's advantageous to the company or the business, don't try and create a mythical profile. That profile needs to be the profile of you and the business. And authenticity is critical, because living a myth is uncomfortable. And then the final piece of advice is, take advice. Surround yourself as you would on the finance side of the business or the product development side of the business with a trusted advisor. Not because you're trying to spin anything, but because good advice is worth its weight in gold in every aspect of the business, and communications as a chief executive is a key responsibility.